Okay, so let's jump right in. The Cretaceous period. What's the first thing that comes to mind? For most of us, it's that final fiery end for the dinosaurs, right? But here's the thing. We're going to look past that. We're going to see how this incredible time in Earth's history wasn't just about an ending, it was actually the beginning of, well, pretty much everything we know today.
Yeah, that's the picture we all have in our heads, isn't it? You've got the T-Rex, the giant space rock, and then boom, game over. Everyone just thinks of it as the chapter where the dinosaurs got wiped out. But is that really all there was to it? Is it just the story of an ending?
Oh, not even a little bit. In fact, that's the whole point we're making here. The Cretaceous wasn't just an ending, it was a massive beginning. This is the period that literally set the stage for our world, our ecosystems, our planet, even us. It's the story of our dawn, happening right under the dinosaurs' noses.
All right, so let's push past that whole extinction story for a minute. We're going to dig into what was happening during this incredible period. It's a story that's not just about the dinosaurs' final days, but about two other huge developments: the explosion of flowers and the quiet, sneaky rise of our own ancestors.
Okay, first things first. To really get what was going on with the animals, you have to get the planet itself. And let me tell you, Cretaceous Earth was a whole different world. I mean, completely alien. Think super hot, think flooded, and a world map you wouldn't even recognize.
It's honestly hard to wrap your head around just how much water there was. We're not talking about the kind of sea level rise we discussed today. No. At its peak, the oceans were up to 250 meters. That's more than 800 feet higher. Imagine the Statue of Liberty underwater with plenty of room to spare. And why? Two big reasons. Massive volcanic activity on the ocean floor was basically pushing the water up, and there was zero, and I mean zero, polar ice caps to lock any of that water away. The planet was basically one big swimming pool.
So all that water had to go somewhere, right? Well, it flooded the continents. Take North America. It got split right in two by this enormous inland sea called the Western Interior Seaway. Just picture it, a warm, shallow ocean running from the Arctic Circle straight down to the Gulf of Mexico. This thing was up to 1,000 kilometers wide. It was a whole new marine world, and it was ruled by some seriously huge and scary marine reptiles.
And the engine driving all of this? A climate we call Greenhouse Earth. It was hot. I mean, really hot. Think average global temperatures more than 10 degrees Celsius warmer than today. All that heat was fueled by volcanoes just pumping CO2 into the air. With that much heat, you can forget about ice. There were no ice caps. Instead, you might have found lush, temperate rainforests growing in Antarctica. Just let that sink in for a moment.
Okay, so that's the physical planet. But what about life on land? While the world's geography was getting a major makeover, the biggest, most important change happening on the ground had nothing to do with dinosaurs. It was something way smaller and way more revolutionary.
Before the Cretaceous, you had the Jurassic, right? And it was green, for sure, but it was kind of a boring green, mostly ferns, conifers, that kind of thing. But then, in the Cretaceous, something incredible happens. A whole new kind of plant shows up, flowering plants. And they don't just show up, they explode. They take over the entire planet, splashing color everywhere, and completely rewriting the rules for life on land.
And this idea, this network of flowers and insects, is just so perfect. Because this wasn't just about plants looking nice. This was the beginning of a whole new system, a partnership that had never existed before. This relationship between plants and their pollinators, well, it's the foundation of pretty much every ecosystem on land today. It all started right here. So here's the genius of it. The plants offer up this sweet, high-energy reward, nectar. And that created a huge opportunity. So what happened? Entirely new kinds of insects evolved just to get that nectar. This is the moment in history when bees, ants, and butterflies first show up. It's this beautiful cycle, right? The flower feeds the bee, and the bee helps the flower reproduce. This partnership, this coevolution, completely reshaped the entire food web.
All right, so we've got our stage, a hot, wet, flower-filled planet. Now, let's bring on the stars of the show. And you know who we have to start with? The undisputed kings of the Cretaceous, who were bigger, badder, and more diverse than ever before.
And you can see right here just how different things were. Those classic Jurassic dinosaurs, like Stegosaurus and Allosaurus, they were ancient history by this point, long gone. The Cretaceous had a totally new lineup. So yeah, that famous movie scene with a T-Rex fighting a Stegosaurus? Cool, but completely impossible. There's more time separating them than there is separating the T-Rex from us. Seriously, the late Cretaceous was like the all-star game of dinosaurs. These are the A-listers, the household names. You've got the one and only Tyrannosaurus rex, the absolute pinnacle of predators. You've got Triceratops, basically a living, breathing tank. And then down in South America, you have the truly mind-boggling Argentinosaurus, maybe the heaviest animal to ever walk on land. Just wow.
But here's a cool twist. T-Rex wasn't always the king. For a long time, the top predators in the north were actually these other massive carnivores called Carcharodontosaurus, the shark-toothed lizards. And then, kind of suddenly, they just disappeared. We're still not totally sure why, but their vanishing act created this huge power vacuum, and that's what gave this smaller, scrappier Tyrannosaurus the opening they needed to evolve into the giants we know and love.
So you've got this epic scene, right? Tyrannosaurs in the north, these other incredible predators called megaraptorans in the south, giant herbivores munching on flowers everywhere. It's a world of giants. So the big question is, where were we? Where were our ancestors in all this?
Well, they were there, the whole time. They were the stars in the shadows, little nocturnal mammals scurrying around at night, trying not to get stepped on. Probably the size of a shrew or a possum. But here's the key thing. They weren't just simple creatures. They were already incredibly advanced. In fact, our own group, the placentals, had already split off from the marsupials. All the potential for the future age of mammals was already there, just waiting in the dark. For millions and millions of years, this is how the world worked. This hot, stable, dinosaur-dominated world. And then, it all came crashing down. Suddenly. Violently. The day that everyone thinks of when they hear the word Cretaceous? Well, it finally came.
We used to think it was just the asteroid, a single bad day. But the picture we have now is a lot more complex. It's more like a 1-2 punch. For a long time before the impact, you had these absolutely colossal volcanic eruptions happening in India. They were already poisoning the atmosphere, already making the planet sick. So the world was already on the ropes when that 10-kilometer-wide asteroid showed up and delivered the knockout blow.
So how did it all go down? What actually killed everything? Well, it was a double-barreled catastrophe. On land, the impact threw so much dust and soot into the air that it blocked out the sun. It plunged the world into a freezing, dark impact winter, and without sunlight, the plants died and the whole food chain just collapsed. But in the oceans, it was even worse. The asteroid slammed into rock that was full of sulfur, which got vaporized and turned the rain into sulfuric acid. It was literally raining acid across the entire planet, turning the oceans toxic.
So just imagine that. A dark, frozen hell on land and an acid bath in the oceans. The end of an era, for sure. But out of all that death and destruction, something new was about to begin. Let's look at what happened next, how their end became our beginning.
In the aftermath, life was split into two groups, those that made it and those that didn't. And if you look at who died, it was the big guys, the specialists, the ones on top. The survivors, they were all small. They were generalists. They were things like our little mammal ancestors that could burrow underground to escape the worst of it, or turtles and crocs that could just wait it out. In this new world, being big and powerful was a fatal flaw. Being small and resourceful was the only way to survive.
What this disaster left behind was basically a blank slate world. All the top jobs, big predator, big herbivore, were suddenly vacant. For the first time in over 150 million years, the planet was wide open. And for our tiny ancestors, this was the opportunity of a lifetime. They went to this incredible evolutionary burst called adaptive radiation. They exploded in number and variety, rapidly evolving to fill every single empty role left behind by the dinosaurs. In the blink of a geological eye, they went from living in the shadows to ruling the world.
And that brings us to one last really big question to think about. If that asteroid had missed, if that catastrophe had never happened, where would we be? Mammals probably would have just stayed small, scurrying around in the dark. The age of dinosaurs might still be going on. So you have to wonder, was the single worst day in the history of life on Earth also the single luckiest day for us?
Welcome back. Today, we're doing something a little different. Instead of just explaining, we're putting your knowledge to the test. This is the Cretaceous Master Challenge.
So, here's the deal. This isn't your average explainer. Nope. This is a full-on knowledge test. 10 questions, 10 answers. And if you get a perfect score, well then you can officially call yourself a Cretaceous Master. Think you've got what it takes? Let's find out how well you really know the last age of the dinosaurs.
Okay, here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll tackle the planet itself, some big, drastic changes. Then, we'll get into the incredible new life that popped up. And we'll finish with a big one, the end of an era and the beginning of ours. Ready? Let's get started. All right, question number 1. Let's start with the basics, the name itself. The word Cretaceous actually comes from a very specific substance, something that tells a huge story about what the planet was like back then. So, what is it? And the answer is chalk. The name comes from the Latin word creta. If you got that, nice job. But here's the really cool part. The name itself is basically a fossil record. See, the Cretaceous was super warm, and sea levels were way higher than they are today. This created these huge, shallow seas that were just perfect for plankton. And for millions of years, their tiny shells rained down on the seafloor, eventually forming these massive chalk deposits we see today. Think of the White Cliffs of Dover. So the name literally tells you this was the age of the sea. Okay, question 2. This one is a classic Hollywood matchup. In one corner, the king of the dinosaurs, Tyrannosaurus rex, and in the other, the plate-backed tank, Stegosaurus. We've seen them fight in movies a million times, but did they ever actually meet in real life? The answer? Nope, not even close. This is pure Hollywood fiction. Think about it. Stegosaurus was from the late Jurassic, about 150 million years ago. T-Rex, he showed up at the very end of the Cretaceous, around 68 million years ago. The time gap between them is more than 80 million years. To put that in perspective, we are closer in time to the T-Rex than the T-Rex was to the Stegosaurus. Mind-blowing, right? Okay, question 3. I want you to picture this. You get in a boat in the Gulf of Mexico, and you sail north, straight through the middle of Kansas, all the way to the Arctic Ocean. That was possible in the Cretaceous because a giant seaway literally split North America in two. What was its name? That would be the Western Interior Seaway. And we're not talking about a big lake here. This thing was a massive saltwater sea, thousands of kilometers long. It basically created this whole new underwater world right in the heart of a continent, and it was home to some of the biggest, baddest predators of the time. Okay, let's leave the sea behind and head back to dry land because a huge revolution was underway. All right, question 4. We're talking about a revolution now, one that completely changed the face of the planet. And here's the twist. The dinosaurs had nothing to do with it. It was a brand new partnership, a co-evolutionary dance between a group of plants and a group of animals that literally created the world we live in today. So, who were these partners? The answer is flowering plants, or angiosperms, and insects. Think bees, ants, butterflies, the whole crew. Before they came along, the world was green, sure, but it was mostly ferns and pine trees. Then flowering plants figured out a brilliant new trick. Hey, insect, I'll give you this sugary nectar if you carry my pollen to the next flower. This partnership was a total game changer. This network of flowers and insects is the foundation of pretty much every ecosystem on land today. Okay, question 5. Everyone knows T-Rex, right? The undisputed king. But he wasn't always on top. For millions of years, the Tyrannosaur family were actually these small, scrappy predators living in the shadows of a much bigger, badder group of carnivores. Who were the original rulers? They were the Carcharodontosaurs, the shark-toothed lizards. And these guys were huge. They absolutely dominated the northern hemisphere. But then, around 90 million years ago, poof, they just vanished. We're still not totally sure why. This left a massive power vacuum, a help-wanted sign for a new apex predator. And that's when the Tyrannosaurs stepped up. With the big guys gone, they had the opportunity to evolve into the giants we know today. It's an amazing story of ecological opportunity. All right, let's head back to that Western Interior Seaway for question 6. This is a common mistake people make. They see a giant swimming reptile and just call it a dinosaur. But the true king of the Cretaceous seas was not a dinosaur. So what was it? If you said mosasaurs, you are absolutely correct. These were giant marine reptiles, and get this, they're more closely related to modern lizards and snakes than they are to dinosaurs. They were latecomers to the party, but they quickly took over, filling the top predator spot after other marine reptiles started to decline. They were, without a doubt, the T-Rex of the sea. Okay, question 7. So we've got dinosaurs on land, mosasaurs in the sea, but where were we? Well, not us exactly, but our earliest ancestors. Were placental mammals, the group we belong to, already around, hiding from the dinosaurs? Or did they only evolve after the big extinction? Oh yeah, they were there. hiding out, living in the shadows. Our ancestors were these small, probably nocturnal creatures doing their best to not get stepped on. But here's the key thing. They weren't just some generic proto-mammal. The big evolutionary split that created our group, the placentals and the marsupials, that had already happened. The stage was set. Our lineage was just waiting in the wings for its chance. And that chance came with a bang, which brings us to our next section.
All right, we've reached the end. The end of the Cretaceous and the dawn of a whole new world. The mass extinction that wiped out the dinosaurs wasn't just one bad day. It was more like a devastating 1-2 punch. So for question 8, what were those 2 knockout blows?
It was a combination of massive volcanic eruptions and a giant asteroid impact. First, you had the volcanoes. For thousands of years, these colossal eruptions in India, we call them the Deccan Traps, were just spewing gas into the atmosphere, messing with the climate and stressing out the ecosystem. You could say the planet already had a fever. And then the asteroid hit. It was the final killer blow to a world that was already on the ropes.
Question 9. So the asteroid hits. It throws a ton of dust into the air, blocking out the sun. That's the impact winter we've all heard about. But that doesn't explain the whole story, especially what happened in the oceans. Something else, a kind of chemical nightmare, was unleashed on the seas. What was it?
The answer, extreme ocean acidification. And this is all about location, location, location. The asteroid just happened to slam into a part of the Earth that was full of sulfur-rich rock. All that vaporized sulfur went into the atmosphere and came down as sulfuric acid rain, all over the globe. The oceans basically turned into a weak acid, and it was devastating. It literally dissolved the calcium carbonate shells of all that plankton at the base of the food chain, the same plankton that gave the Cretaceous its name. The entire marine ecosystem collapsed from the bottom up. Just brutal.
All right, here we are, the final question, number 10. This one is a bit of a detective story, connecting modern fossil discoveries to the ancient, drifting continents. We know T-Rex and its family ruled the northern continents, like a Tyrannosaur empire. But the southern continents had their own top predators. So what is the name of a dinosaur from this southern group that was bizarrely discovered in Fukui, Japan? And the answer is Fukuraptor. A bit of a trick question, but it's a great example of how continental drift shapes evolution. As the supercontinent Pangaea broke apart, you ended up with 2 main landmasses. The tyrannosaurs evolved to become the top dogs in the north, but in the south, a totally different group, the megaraptorans, rose to the top. It was like 2 separate evolutionary experiments running in parallel on a divided planet. 2 empires of carnivores, each ruling their own half of the world. And that's it. The quiz is done. 10 questions spanning nearly 80 million years of incredible history. So go ahead, tally up your score. But before we see how you did, let's just take a moment to think about what this all means. Because what the Cretaceous really teaches us is about endings and beginnings. That absolutely devastating world-ending event for the dinosaurs. For our tiny mammal ancestors, it was the opposite. It was the starting gun. The catastrophe wiped the slate clean, and that's what gave our ancestors the chance to step out of the shadows and eventually, after a very long time, give rise to us. So, how did you do? Did you get a perfect 10? Did you earn the title of Cretaceous Master? I really hope you had fun with this challenge.